Hey, friends. Happy Tuesday. I'm so glad to be here with you virtually today. I have been having a great conversation with my friend, and I just wanted to share it. It inspired me. And we were just talking about rediscovering ourselves in our 30s and what that has been like for us. And man, I realized, and I'm only going to speak about myself because, right, I don't know what you've been through and what you got going on. But I feel like for me, I am in the process of rediscovering myself. And I realized there's a lot of things that was a trauma response for me and my personality. And when you get to that point that you realize that, God really starts pruning those things and removing it, and then you're like, dang, I thought this was my personality. It's like, no, that was your response to the traumatic environment you were in. And then as God starts to kind of create, renew you, make you different as you grow, you seek therapy, you seek counseling, you meditate, you pray, you really understand yourself even more, and you understand your quirks, you understand what you struggle with, you understand these different things. And I think for me, I have been feeling conflicted about the old me versus the new me. And it's so weird to say because I feel like I'm emerging as a different person. And when you are growing and maturing and changing, you don't understand how much that old you will try to fight what the new you is, right? With the new who the new you is, right? And I'm definitely feeling like one of the biggest things as a child that I felt, if I remember what I do remember correctly, is that I felt very misunderstood. I felt very judged, misunderstood, rejected, abandoned. Um, just misunderstood is the biggest word. I mean, that's the biggest part of it, the big chunk. And I never really dealt with the fact that I felt that. And when you feel like you're misunderstood, you really don't care what people think because you're like, you're going to misunderstand me anyway. But is a part of validation, right? Seeking validation from family and not getting it. So for a long time, I never really cared what people thought. I still don't, to be honest with you. But I do feel like I'm much more private about my life. That I'm much more secluded. I don't allow everybody to have access to me as much as I used to. I used to let a lot of people in and things like that. But I feel like I've definitely matured in that area. And I definitely give people a chance more now than I used to. Before, I used to cut you off, within a 2 seconds into the conversation, I'm not going to talk to you again. But now I've been dealing with having to really forgive people, not forgive them without them saying sorry. Um, Choosing to let people misunderstand me and not feel like I have to hold it against them. You get what I'm saying? Like that is something that I didn't even know. Literally, as I'm talking to y'all, I feel like that misunderstanding. I always wanted to be understood and I always wanted to be heard. And I had to realize that if nobody else understands or nobody else hears me, God does. And being okay with that. You get what I'm saying? That was something that I did not realize was even an issue until I spoke to my friend this morning. And we were just talking about the growing pains of not just your 30s, any age you are, but we're in our 30s. You are out of your parents' house, right? You may be married or not married, you may have kids or you may not have kids, right? Depending on who you are. It is a very weird time because your 20s have concluded. So now you are having to have your life together, right? You are having to get stuff together. Certain things that used to fly in your 20s, now in your 30s are just not going to fly. Not because of other people, but really because of how you want to perceive yourself. And I started thinking about, I was reading a book the other night, and the author was just talking about his childhood self and how he's changed and grown, and how his childhood self will be so proud of him and what he's overcome. Right. And I felt the same way about myself, because I said, with my 13-year-old self, I was very confident about who I was and where I was going. And it created conflict with the environment I was in. Because when you know who you are, a lot of the times people don't know who they are. And in that will try to create a narrative to push their own agenda for whatever reason. And I remember as a kid, I would say things, but it didn't match the life that I was living, right? It didn't match my childhood. It didn't match, what people said and spoke over me. And to see what God has done with my life now, I feel sometimes I'm very conflicted internally with the truth, right? The truth of who you really are, and who you have grown to be and how you've overcome things. And I know that old you will definitely she will try to keep coming back. But I'm realizing, like, as you grow, it's some growing pains, because now you are changing, you are developing, you are healing. As you're going through your healing journey, literally, you will change. And before, I was way more, I won't even say bold, just defensive, I would say. Um and I always came from a place of having to defend who I was, and what I wanted. So now when you're in a season where you're no longer an orphan, you're not trying to strive and, do all of this stuff, God will really, like, for me, I feel like he's been dealing with a lot of things that I overlooked in my past, a lot of things that I combed over, a lot of things I did not deal with, um, a lot of things that I have questions about even now. Him just being so merciful and gracious, willing to help me to understand myself even more. And I feel like when you're in a different season of your life, you have to learn how to walk through that season all over again. You have to learn how to live through that season all over again. Not because you completely have no personality, don't know who you are. You know who you are, but you will change with the season. Like, the season is going to bring things out of you that need to go, and then strengthen things that need to stay. And in realizing that, I just really had to come to that realization, like, you're not only are you enough, because it's not just to say you're enough. As long as you understand you, you do not need anyone else to understand. And a lot of things in my life, I felt like very misunderstood with, and I still did it. Right? It didn't stop me from doing what I felt God had called me to do, but I never noticed that it also hurt me that people didn't understand. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because I hope this helps somebody. I'm telling y'all my business. I didn't understand. I didn't know I even needed that validation, but because I never got it, I never really looked for it. So I always did end up doing what I wanted to do, but I never noticed that hurt me or that bothered me, that people did not understand. And I remember one time someone said, when you get deliverance, it's like what did they say? It's like a house, or what is a boat? Something like that, house or a boat, and you don't see the damage, like, and it flood like a boat. I think it was boat was the analogy, y'all. Don't quote me, but basically it says once everything is flushed out, then you see what the damage was. Then you see what needs to be restored. You see what needs to be healed, and a lot of things will happen to make you really take a deeper look inside yourself. Right? And really just accept your differences, and accept the way your mind works, accept your quirkiness, accept, your the way your mind, I'll keep saying where your mind works, but the way you think, your wisdom, your capabilities, your talents, your gifts. Like, take a moment to really just accept that with no conditions. Embrace it with no conditions. Love it with no conditions. And I think for me, it's a blessing because I never, not that I didn't have the space, I didn't give myself the space and room to be okay with being misunderstood and it not hurting, not seeking validation or looking for validation, but appreciating it if it comes. Does that make sense? And there's a, there's always a balance to life. There's a balance to how you have to do things. And I think for me, when I process things, my mind, the way it works, I need to flesh things out. Thoughts, I need to speak it out of myself. I don't know if everybody else is like that, but I'm usually like that. So I need to try to understand that's why therapy is so important. Y'all get y'all a good old therapist. Okay. If you Black, get you a Black therapist. I have a Black therapist. Very big on therapy because you get to talk things out with someone who has no ulterior motives. They don't know your friends and what your mama said, your daddy said, your sister said, your brother said. They only know what you're telling them. And hopefully, what God ever ministers to their spirit, what he's telling them as well. And they really tend to bring out things and say things, for me personally, my experience, that I had never heard nobody say to me. And when that happens, you start to really be like, wait, well, is this person right or is this person right? Like, who is right about who I truly am? And when you see it through the lens of being healed, like you see yourself through the eyes of healing, you're like, well, I really am a caring person. I really am kind. I really am gentle. I'm really nice. I'm really bold as well. But I'm also bold and passionate about things that I care about. And I think we need to pay more attention to our growing pains. Growing pains don't mean that you're going backwards. It doesn't even mean that you're doing something wrong. I think that it means that you are in such a safe space that God is like, I can now deal with the pain. I can now deal with the need for something outside of yourself. I can now deal with that little girl in the inside of you. I can now deal with the fear. I can now deal with the anxiety. I can now deal with the shame. I can now deal with the discouragement. I can now deal with the weaknesses because you're in a place where externally you are safe. And now you can see, oh, I kind of cleave to this. I didn't notice that about myself, but I just, cleave to this sometimes. I didn't even notice that. I didn't even notice this about myself. And it's easy for you to hate and despise those things that you see during those growing pains. But it's not to despise it. It's to embrace those characteristics and flaws because that still makes up you. God sees it and he still loves you regardless. So it's super important, I think, in this season of loving yourself through the mistakes, loving yourself through the confusion, loving yourself through the internal, struggle between the past and the present. You know what I mean? And also embracing and loving yourself with no conditions. With not, oh, I love myself, but I could be a little small, but I could be a little taller, but I could, no, love even the nastiest part of you the way that God does. You know what I'm saying? I think we get to this place where I'm in my 30s. I should have this, this, and this, and this, and that, and that, and that, and boom, boom, boom. And I was just watching this show, which y'all know I stay watching the show, okay? And I feel like in my life, I can't speak for everybody. Every time I watch something, every time I watch a movie or hear a song or, go a place, it's something always there that teaches me something, right? So I feel like I'm constantly learning every day. And in the movie, it was a young, kids. They was 12 years old and they met their future selves, right? And as kids, we have these big dreams and ideas and things like that we want to accomplish. and then they physically met their older selves. And I found it so interesting because every time they met their older self, they were disappointed, right? And they were like, but they didn't take into account, because they're 12, into account what may have happened to the adult self to make them feel and be where they were, right? It was hard for each girl to realize that her older self had been through something or been through things that pushed them in a direction. And that movie, it was 9 episodes. It's on Amazon. It's a really good show. Y'all know I like to watch shows. It really was interesting to me. Like, I was really intrigued by the concept of the show, and then the fact that the book was saying to write a letter to my 13-year-old self and talk to them, right? And the truth, and it really was, like I said, it was really interesting to me because I was already in this place where I felt like I was already processing and rediscovering myself, right? And I was like, would 13-year-old me be proud of me? Would 16-year-old me be proud of me? Would 21-year-old of me be like, I started trying to figure out, would she be proud? And I started thinking about all that God had allowed me to accomplish, all that I have seen, the things that he has allowed me to do. And I was like, regardless of not whether she's proud or not, I'm so proud of me. Like, the resilience, the love, the grace, the mercy, the forgiveness that I've learned to extend to people had to come from God, because it wasn't there before. It was not there. Cutting you off, okay? Feel offended, I feel hurt, and it wasn't always the other person that did something wrong. Does that make sense? Sometimes it was something that I felt where I'm like, the way you're saying it or the way you're doing this reminds me of this, remind me of this person or this situation or this thing, right? So that person, not even knowing that this is invoking something else inside of me. This is evoking a response from me. Now, I will say, everybody that ever cut off, I would never be friends with them again, right? I would never date them again. I don't want nobody from the past, but it does make you reevaluate some things that have happened, right? It makes me rediscover myself again and say, wow, you really have changed and grown in so many ways. You really have loved people despite, right? You have really forgiven people despite. You have really chose not to choose to be, in a negative way, like not to be offended, not to be hurt, not to be like, choosing forgiveness every day is not easy, but it is needed, because if you harboring that unforgiveness in your heart, that bitterness, that resentment, that abandonment, that suspicion of everything, everybody, you know what I mean? You cannot move forward. And it's hard to move forward. And if you do, you won't even enjoy it, because that darkness does not help you to move forward, and it feels so heavy. It's like baggage weighing you down, and you really have to let things go. You know what I'm saying? So I even let go of seeking the validation of my 13-year-old self. Like, girl, I love you. You went through hell. You've been through a lot. At 13, I remember what was happening in my life. I remember not everything, but of course, some things you don't forget. And just knowing the type of woman I am now, the type of friendships I have, the type of environments I'm in, the type of people I've met, the places I've been, the things I've experienced, I can honestly say a lot of it is so powerful, because I know when I look at, people in my bloodline, they are not, unfortunately, not in situations where they are really having happiness and joy and laughter and peace within themselves, and forgiving people, communicating and seeking therapy and things like that. And I know it is a gift. I know it is a gift from God. I know it's his wisdom that he's allowed me to use to do the things that I need to do so I can be healthy, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. It's so important. So in my 30s, I can honestly say it is a season of rediscovery and rediscovering myself and finding out, okay, who am I now? Yeah, that was me back then. Yep, I used to go off the handle. Yep, I used to do that. I used to do this. I used to do this. But who are you now? Why are you, even if it's like there's fear popping up, why are you afraid to move forward, or why are you hesitant to move forward? Okay, you've been in uncharted territory before, right? You've done things for the first time before. What's so different about it now? Rediscovery, y'all. That thing hit me right before I hit record. And I was like, this is such a powerful topic because your 30s is such a strange time, and not in a bad way, but definitely in a peculiar way. And I don't know what 40s is like, but I think this decade for me has been rediscovery and just realignment in the truth of who I really am. And that is a journey. It's not an easy one, but it's such a needed one. So I hope whoever listens, if you listen or you watch or you play it in the background or you send it to your sister, your brother, your cousin, thank you so much for supporting this podcast. Thank you so much for being a listening ear. And I will ramble on, but I just hope that this blesses and helps you personally in your own walk. While we have different walks and our paths are not the same, I do feel like we have similar experiences. So I really do hope that you get something from these podcasts. Leave a comment below, like, comment, share. If you ever want to appear on the Faceless Podcast, or there's any topics that you feel like you would like to talk about or see me talk about, or collaborate with me and speak to me about, definitely let me know. Because I love to have conversations with people, even though we may not always agree about certain things. I do feel like I like to have the dialogues going. So definitely like, comment, share. I love y'all so much. Liz B over and out. Until next time. Bye.